Reconciling difficult emotions is a skill set that each of us can adopt and gradually get better and better at. The first thing to look at when we experience some kind of difficulty, difficult emotions, difficult situations, is we first need to acknowledge the disappointment, the loss, the mourning of what occurred without moving to. So when you move to blaming and shaming either yourself or others, you're actually abandoning those feelings and often moving to another set of difficult emotions, which is not complicating and not helping us reconcile. So we need to notice, I am disappointed or I'm hurt. Oftentimes people are angry, and in practice, I've never met someone who is actually angry. That's usually a secondary response to a more vulnerable emotion. For example, often when people are angry, they're actually hurt, or they feel helpless, or they feel sad, or they feel powerless. And those emotions can appear to be quite vulnerable. So then they respond to those emotions with anger. And then they identify, I'm just an angry person. Well, no, you're just hurt or sad or disappointed. And it becomes really important to create space for that. Many of us have a lot of unhelpful secondary reactions. So, like anxiety can often be a secondary emotion. It's a response to, again, a vulnerable emotion that we don't want to experience. So, we become anxious when this hurt comes up, and then the anxiety takes over. So, anger and anxiety, in general, from my anecdotal experience, are generally secondary emotions. It's the primary that's what we need to first acknowledge. Then, once we acknowledge that, we can look at how does this feeling change my perception of reality, and what might I be losing now? So maybe we had high hopes for a new friend or a romantic love interest, but as time progressed, we realized that yes, they have good qualities, but they're not going to be able to fix everything. And so now we have a sense of sadness, of hopelessness, and we want to just acknowledge that. It doesn't have to take over. We don't have to blame ourselves, we don't have to blame others, but we need to acknowledge that. We need to honor that experience because it's one of a human experience. It's an experience that we're not going to be able to necessarily avoid, even with all of our best efforts. Then we can look at what might be some gifts that can come from this. People like Viktor Frankl, who sat through and passed away in the Holocaust, was able to bring some really beautiful gifts in what he wrote. So there's always an opportunity for gifts and difficulties, but first we have to believe that, because sometimes we don't. We think the only gifts there are is that life goes perfectly, which is not realistic. Then, once we honor that experience, we identify the gifts, then we can move into the reconciliation where life is not either or, black and white. That will always be a recipe for pain. It's usually this and that. So this is what's called dialectical, where two opposing experiences or thoughts can exist at the same time. This is where reconciliation begins to exist, when we can create a tolerance to being more dialectical. So thank you.